This was a big fight in Europe between the future of the heavyweight division. 16-0, 13 knockouts, Dillian Whyte versus 14-0, 14 knockouts, Olympic gold medalist Anthony Joshua. This fight was for the WBC International title, which I'm just going to put out there. Winning this belt gets you nowhere. International and the silver, you're going to be waiting a long time for a title shot. I would call it, we're putting you on the shelf to gather dust title. Besides that on the line, you have the more meaningful British Commonwealth title, Triple B of C British title, very meaningful belts. Winning these, you are the best heavyweight in the UK, which will open you up to title shots down the road. Good action from the starting bell, which a little bit of drama occurred after the first round. The second round, Whyte really started to put some leather on Joshua, landing big shots as Joshua out of nowhere stopped using his reach advantage and abandoned the jab. Joshua will come back in the third to take the tempo away from Whyte and get back to using his reach advantage, to where Whyte was no longer able to land anything threatening, resulting him to fatigue. In the seventh round, Whyte's defense was loosened so much that Joshua was able to set him up with a shot that he couldn't get earlier in the fight to immediately put away Whyte.
Surely no way up here for Dillian Whyte. It's stopped. It's over.
The 21-year-old 6-0 Kazuto Ioka started off his 2011 year with a bang, dethroning 35-0 Oredong CP Freshmart for the WBC strawweight title. Akira Yayagashi later that year, at his second crack at the title, won the WBA crown and a Fight of the Year nominee against Ponsawan Pompramuk. Ioka was ranked number 2 in the world, and Yayagashi was ranked number 10 by Ring Magazine. This fight was a WBC and WBA unification. For Japan's biggest fight of the year, it lived up to all the hype, easily a nominee for Fight of the Year. Both guys were giving it their all every round. Yayagashi had to avoid the ref and ringside doctors, stopping the fight numerous times as both his eyes were almost completely shut due to swelling. Despite all of that, Yayagashi fought hard and the fight was close on the scorecards. Ioka would pull off the very close split decision to become the unified champion. Two judges scored it 115-113, and the last judge had it 115-114. This was the final fight for the undisputed title before the WBO organization was recognized by all belt organizations, to where the fighter is now required to have that belt to become undisputed, starting in the year 2007. Which, this is sad here because the winner of this match unfortunately passed away, and the boxing media leading up to the Crawford Indongo fight failed to even acknowledge this man. Jermaine Taylor is not the last undisputed champion. He had vacated the IBF title shortly after the Hopkins fight in 2005, which Arthur Abraham later picked up at the end of that year. Zab Judah lost his undisputed title against Carlos Baldomir January 6 of 2006. This fight was on the same day and on the same card. Despite Carlos Baldomir upsetting Judah, it was some funky things that happened and Judah's IBF title was not on the line, so Baldomir never became the undisputed champion, but he became the lineal welterweight champion. Mormac will pick up an early lead on Bell.
A big left hand. In his last fight was hurt by Mormac. Oh, great combination to the head by Mormac. There goes the mouthpiece.
Towards the middle of the fight, Bell would pick up the pieces and come back as Mormac began to tire out. Bell would finally crack through Mormac in the 7th round.
This thing has really turned around. He's exhausted. He's run out of gas. And he's
Mormac would let out one last ditch effort to combat Bell's gaining momentum and ended up gassing himself out. Bell finally put down Mormac in the 10th round to stop him with 12 seconds on the clock. Bell becomes the first undisputed cruiserweight champion since Evander Holyfield in 1988.
Bell smothering him. He goes down for the first time in his career. Crumbles to the canvas. It's over. And O'Neal Bell is the undisputed cruiserweight champ, the first since Holyfield.
Majority of fight fans felt like Garcia's win against Khan was a fluke, followed up with an unimpressive win against an old Eric Morales, a rematch with him absolutely no one asked for, then lastly a fight with Zab Judah, where Judah really got the best of Garcia later in the fight to squeak away with a close, unanimous decision. Lucas Matisse was really starting to build up some hype in a year and a half, rolling through Humberto Soto, a Jose prospect Dallas Jr., and former champion Lamont Peterson, which he put him away in 3 rounds. Matisse was the interim champion 2 fights before the Peterson match, and he very well could have sat on his rank. As inconsistent as the WBC is when it comes to enforcing mandatory defenses, him and his team had to create a public demand going on a quick spree against these guys, which the Peterson fight was almost a setup. The interim title wasn't on the line, and if Lucas happened to lose, he would have been stripped. So you got a Dylan White situation, except that silver title was on the line against Povetkin. Based on Matisse's performance, it created enough of a demand that the fight was made later that year as a co-main event on Mayweather-Canelo. So you got 2 guys at the peak of their game fighting on an historic pay-per-view headliner. The fight started off slow for Danny. Lucas would rake in the first 3 rounds just based off of effective aggression.
Some sharp counterpunching, but Matisse's been the attack according to show stats. Oh my, that left hook had some thunder on it.
Danny would pick it up and even the cards up. The 7th round, as Garcia damaged Lucas's eye, causing it to swell up bad. With the scorecards incredibly close coming into the 11th, Matisse would start the round off huge, hitting Garcia with his cleanest, most effective shot in the fight. And Garcia was not fazed at all, but his mouthpiece flew a great distance. As Lucas was raking in more points, Danny caught him with a row of shots to put Matisse down for the first time in his career. Garcia would end the round big, out-throwing and hustling Matisse. Danny would do enough to win round 12, but he would get a point taken away for low blows, making it a 9-9 round, or 10-9 for Matisse if a judge wanted to give him that round. Danny would win by a narrow 114-112 on the scorecards, and gain the respect he deserved, defeating, at that time, boxing's Terminator. IBF and WBA unification between 38-2 Humberto Gonzalez and undefeated 30-0 Michael Carbajal. This fight was the first light flyweight fight in boxing to be a pay-per-view main event. Oscar De La Hoya versus Jeff Mayweather was the co-main event. This fight started off incredibly fast. In round 2, Carbajal gets dropped. Gonzalez was just getting the better of Carbajal, despite it being a very entertaining fight. Carbajal gets dropped once again in the 5th round by Gonzalez. Back and forth action in the 6th round, but the momentum was all Gonzalez. 7th round, Carbajal came out of nowhere in the final 20 seconds to knock out Gonzalez. Gonzalez was unable to make the count, and Carbajal becomes a new unified light flyweight champion. This fight was named Ring Magazine 1993 Fight of the Year. These guys will have a rematch a year later. Michael Carbajal will make history as the first boxer under 126 pounds to earn a $1 million purse. This is just your classic heavyweight fight. Olympic medalist versus Olympic medalist. The undisputed heavyweight champion, Evander Holyfield, at the peak of his game, 28-0, 22 knockouts. Riddick Bowe, 31-0, 27 knockouts. An absolute war. I don't even want to spoil this fight for the newcomers. This is a fight everyone who is new to the sport should watch. It's absolutely amazing. Everything you possibly want out of a prize fight that goes all 12 rounds. I don't think this fight actually needs an introduction or backstory. This was for the undisputed middleweight championship. Both guys did a great job promoting the fight. Hagler stating he is going to war, and this exceeded every fight fan's expectations. Ring Magazine called round 1 the greatest round in boxing history. Lomachenko's lightweight debut was against WBA and lineal champion Jorge Linares in a close, entertaining fight. He stopped Linares late to become the fastest 3-division champion in 12 fights. He will pick up the WBO belt, his next fight against Jorge Pedraza, then a couple fights later, the WBC against Luke Campbell. All while this is happening, you had a very motivated Lopez quickly rising through the American ranks, then into the world ranks, defeating Mason Menard for the NABF and USBA title. Very important titles for people who live in North America and the US. NABF signifies you are the best contender in North America, and the USBA signifies you are the best contender in the United States. Very important milestone titles that I don't understand why the media devalues. Lopez picks up another important North American belt against Diego Magdaleno. The USBA is linked up with the IBF, and this gives Lopez a chance to make a run for the IBF title. In the title eliminator, he had to face 18-0 OPBF champion Masayoshi Nakatani. Lopez took the hardest but the most guaranteed route to get a title shot. I wrote about Masayoshi years back as a fighter to keep an eye on to become a contender and a potential title holder, as he had good power, skills, and incredibly big for the weight class. 71 reach and almost 6 feet tall in the lightweight division. At that time, when I wrote about him, which was in 2014, the lightweight division was a completely different place, and this wonder kid Teofimo was not around. Lopez in his biggest test beats Nakatani by a wide margin to earn his shot for the IBF against Richard Kami. I really had high hopes for Nakatani. It is sad people would use this fight as an example that Lopez did not have a chance against world-class competition. Kami was ranked number 3 in the world by Ring Magazine, and Teofimo was unranked. He certainly fought like he was a top 10 ranked fighter, blowing Kami away in 2 rounds. Top Rank now has 2 fighters who hold the majority of the belts, but I didn't think Bob Arum wanted to make this fight happen because Lopez is so young. He doesn't have to fight Vasil yet. But Lopez really wanted this fight, but in due time, Bob Arum caved in and this fight was made, autumn of 2020. Lopez came in as a 4-1 underdog, which I didn't really understand why. I saw it more as a 50-50 matchup. Anyone who DM'd me asking who you think is going to win, my initial reply was, it's too close to call. I'm not touching it, but if you want to make some money, put it on Lopez. Lopez that night rose to the occasion, put up a sizable lead on the scorecards. Loma will rally, tightening it up, but Lopez would get a second wind and take the championship rounds by storm. Now I saw it as a pretty close fight, but the right man won, which was Lopez. A great fight, a great story, all shadowed by incompetent judging. Lopez becomes the king of the lightweight division and a potential pay-per-view star. One of the biggest fights of the 80s. Both guys are undisputedly in their primes. Very rarely a fight will be made at the pinnacle of its hype. There was a little bit of a wait, but Leonard was able to get the money he righteously deserved for this matchup.
You are dodging that man.
Well, the fact is just what they say. They've made statements that I'm trying to get away from Thomas Hearns, that I'm afraid of him. The only thing that I fear is the fact that they won't pay me the money that I deserve, the money that I want.
Aren't you afraid he's going to beat you?
I'm not afraid of any man.
A guaranteed $8 million plus pay-per-view revenue, which totaled to $11 million. This was for the undisputed welterweight championship. Hearns put up a lead early on. Leonard would rally and tighten up the scorecards, possibly evening it up, but Hearns would come back and rake in enough rounds to where Leonard would need a knockout to win into the 14th round. Angelo Dundee, Leonard's trainer, didn't have to say much, which gave Sugar a second wind, and he finally got through Hearns, stopping him towards the halfway point of the 14th round.
He's going to be knocked out.
With Danny Garcia moving up, vacating the WBC, lineal, and WBA belts, the division was at an exciting power grab. Terrence Crawford had moved up to the junior welterweight division and scooped the WBO titles against Thomas Delorme to later unify the division against Victor Postal to become the WBC, WBO, and lineal champion. Meanwhile, I am witnessing before my eyes the most amazing run by a wildcard fighter. So Ndongo is not tied to anyone politically, which I mean a network or a promotion, so he can freely go wherever he pleases. So Edward T picked up the IBF belt in 2015, dethroning 48-0 Caesar, then to stop him once again in the rematch. He will make another quick defense ending in the second round. His third defense will be against little-known Julius Ndongo. Edouard was building up his reputation as one of the hardest punchers in boxing, and I would say he was a fight away from breaking through and going to America to make a name of himself. But Ndongo ruined such dreams in 40 seconds of the first round, knocking Edouard out. Ricky Burns just won the WBA title, and his handlers saw Ndongo as possibly an easy fight, and since he's tied to no one politically, the fight was easily made. IBF and WBA unification, and little him and his team knew, this was not no flash in the pan. Ndongo swept Burns, completely shutting him out on the scorecards to pick up another belt. There was a hold-up. I didn't know what was the hold-up at that time, because this is an opportunity that Crawford cannot pass up. This is a career-defining, historic match. It was mainly over money because, my gosh, these sanction fees were ridiculous. This is why fighters don't like becoming undisputed champion or want to unify. It's expensive. It's like driving a Maserati or a Mercedes G-Class or any Mercedes made after 1999. It sure looks nice, but it's incredibly impractical due to poor build quality and expensive maintenance fees. These poor guys had to pay more than $100,000 in fees. So you gotta pay a title tax, and since you're now in a new tax bracket, you gotta pay Uncle Sam a big tax, which leaves you with chump change. This was Crawford's coming out party, and he did not disappoint, easily beating Ndongo in 3 rounds to become the first undisputed champion since O'Neal Bell in 2006. This is possibly one of the most unexpected rivalries in boxing history. Pong Sakalek Wangjongkam became the WBC and lineal flyweight champion in 2001. In early 2002, he was making his 4th title defense of the flyweight crown against WBC mandatory, little-known 19-0 Daisuke Naido. Wangjongkam knocked him out in the first 34 seconds of the fight, resulting in the quickest knockout in flyweight history. The original record was held by Emil the Spider Pladner when he knocked out Frankie Gennaro for the title in 1929. So really, how in the world did this matchup turn into a rivalry? I'm getting there. Naido would go on a spree of wins, beating the right guys to get him in position to fight Wangjongkam in a rematch. Incredibly exciting rematch. The fight would unfortunately get stopped on cuts due to an unintentional foul. It will go to the scorecards. Naido will lose the fight by 2 rounds. Naido once again rebounded, beating one of Wangjongkam's mandatories, then to pick up the OPBF title, which a fight later, he was finally in line to fight Wangjongkam for a 3rd time. The 3rd time was the charm, and Naido ended Wangjongkam's historic reign as lineal champion, as he had made 17 title defenses in 6 years. Obviously, there was going to be a rematch after Naido beat Daiki Kameda and their super fight by unanimous decision. The fourth fight is now on. The fourth fight being the most exciting out of them all. Incredibly close on the scorecards. Depending how you saw it, you could give it to either guy. The judges ruled the fight a draw, so since these guys are the best in the division, there was going to be a fifth fight, but the hype for a Naido versus Kameda fight was on the level of De La Hoya Mayweather in Japan. The WBC made it that the winner has to fight Wang Kim, who had already won the WBC interim title, just sat on rank and chilled for the results to come. Naido put up a good effort, but he turned old overnight, and the young Koki Kameda dethroned Naido. Wang Kim would beat Kameda and regain the lineal and WBC title. Despite Naido fighting 2 months after Wang Kim regained the title, I can only assume he felt like it was time to hang up the gloves and retired from boxing, putting this rivalry to an unresolved end. Spence Jr., easily the best fighter at welterweight. Number 4 ranked Shawn Porter, consistently one of the best for quite some time. Porter won Keith Thurman's vacant WBC welterweight title, beating Danny Garcia by a 12-round unanimous decision. This is his second defense of that title. For Spence, this would be his 4th defense of the IBF title. I think many were thinking, coming to this unification, that Spence was going to easily outbox Porter and have better success than what Kell Brook was able to do in his fight with Porter. This is a case of styles make fights, and Porter gave Spence the hardest fight of his career. From the opening bell, Porter made it known that Spence was going to have a long night, making the fight as rough as possible. Spence had his hands full because Porter is such a physical and strong fighter that can upset one's rhythm. What also didn't help was Porter kept on leading with his head, causing the heads to butt, trying to make the fight even more uncomfortable for Spence. But Spence was not fazed. He was incredibly focused and unbothered by the rough tactics to have success. Incredibly close fight, as close as it is. I think what sealed it for Spence was the absolutely beautiful short left hook that landed to drop Porter in the 11th round.
1 minute remaining.
Both guys finished the fight strong, landing bombs on each other. Such a good fight. Everything you possibly wanted and then some. Spence would become the unified welterweight champion by a split decision. Coming into 1999, Corte was clearly one of the best welterweights, same as De La Hoya. De La Hoya was making his 6th defense of the WBC title. Absolutely risky fight, as everyone wanted to see a De La Hoya Trinidad matchup. One of the most entertaining fights to end off the 90s. Both guys putting it all on the line.
As De La Hoya missed the right upstairs, dropping right in hand inside by Corte. Both fighters experiencing some moments.
Oscar puts down Corte in the 6th, then Corte would immediately even things up and put Oscar down in that very same round.
Off with a stiff jab.
And down goes Corte on a classic De La Hoya left hook.
Start reaching.
Right hand retaliation for Corte. De La Hoya begins to open up and trade, taking chances, contemplate finishing it. Down goes De La Hoya on a left hand counter by Corte.
Straight nail biter in the second half. Corte having the slight edge on Oscar coming into the championship rounds. Oscar needed to finish the 12th huge to pull a win, or at least a draw. Oscar, to start the 12th round, knocks Corte down with a perfect signature left hook. De La Hoya is taking absolutely no chances at all and goes for the finish. Corte is out on his feet, but he's still fighting back. The ref was about to jump in and stop the fight numerous occasions, but Corte kept on, doing just enough for him not to step in. He also took notice that Oscar had no more gas on his shots and was on a verge of punching himself out. Oscar had done enough and then some to clearly take the 12th round, and that was the deciding factor of the fight. Oscar will win by a close split decision. This fight was a unification for the IBF and WBO titles, but really to prove who's the best fighter out of Albuquerque, New Mexico. The fight was on neutral grounds of Las Vegas, but it was the Battle of Albuquerque. A lot of bad blood between these two. I would like to hear both sides of the story. All I know is Tapia's side, and that was pretty much Romeo had a lot of animosity towards him because he felt like he was the good guy and Tapia, who battled inner demons and always got in trouble, was the bad guy. He did not like that at all, that Tapia was receiving so much attention instead of him. And tensions became far more toxic when Tapia returned to the sport. The tensions became so bad that there was rumors that rival New Mexico gangs were taking sides representing either Tapia or Romeo. The Vegas law enforcement took this very seriously and unprecedented measures. We saw one of the first boxing matches where press, event staff, and spectators had to go through security checkpoints with metal detectors, and police specifically looking for potential gang members. Incredibly exciting match from both sides, but Tapia put on a career-defining performance, out-hustling Romeo to win by a hard-fought unanimous decision. This was the Super Middleweight Tournament Finals. Despite this only being for the WBC, WBA, and ring titles, both guys had fought and beaten the best in this weight class. Lucien Boutte was ranked number 2, but he decided not to fight in the tournament, which tainted the rankings for the fight because Froch was ranked at number 3, Ward at number 1. The ring title is vacant, and only in rare occasions ring will allow the number 1 rank to fight the number 3 ranked for the vacant title. This is a perfect example because Boutte didn't want any of that heat and was not part of the tournament from the start. Ward and Froch, both guys have a unique style, very elusive. Ward was able to crack through that and mount up a sizable lead on Froch. As Ward started to tire just a bit, Froch would start to rake in some rounds. Ward would rally back despite Froch's efforts. Ward refused to allow Froch to take over the fight. Ward would pull off the unusually close unanimous decision to become the man at super middle. I say unusual because 2 of the judges scored it incredibly close, 115-113, meaning which if Froch won 2 more rounds, it would have been a draw. WBC and IBF unification for junior welterweight supremacy. Everyone and their mom knows the story of this fight, so let's talk about the forgotten controversy leading up to this fight. LA Times did an investigative article on Chavez's undefeated record back in March of 1990. They had found out that there was more to what meets the eye. On April 3rd, 1981, Julio Cesar Chavez received his first professional loss and his 12th professional bout by first round disqualification. 1983 and 1984 record books had this fight against Miguel Ruiz completely removed as it never existed. 86 and 87 record books have it magically returned into a first round knockout. As of 1990, 3 record keeper books had Chavez listed 67-1, with his first loss being against Miguel Ruiz by first round disqualification. If it matters, even Italian record books at that time had Chavez listed with 1 loss. Dick Mastro stated that Chavez's loss was expunged to preserve a great young prospect's unbeaten record. Someone obviously decided that it would be a shame to leave that loss on his record, so it was decided to just get rid of it. I've carried that loss on his record ever since. It's the promoters and the press that keeps calling him unbeaten." End quote. The Culiacan Commission overturned the result, saying Chavez had not hit the guy after the bell, as the referee ruled it was a hit after the bell. Mastro stated, "No commission can overturn a referee's judgment call." He cites a 1952 New York State Supreme Court case regarding a Joey Girardello fight. So this is big here. According to Mastro, the Supreme Court ruled that the New York State Athletic Commission had no authority to overturn a referee's judgment call. So there you have it, guys. The link to this article will be in the description. So yeah, the fight, well, Taylor puts up up a sizable lead, but Chavez's constant pressure wore out Taylor. Chavez, needing a knockout to win, was able to stop Taylor in the final 10 seconds of the fight, as Taylor failed to respond to any of Steele's questions. I go in further detail about how Steele was actually telling the truth, how he will stop a fight if the fighter is unresponsive. His high standards that the boxing public ridiculed him for having saved the life of Joichiro Tatsuyoshi against Vira Posahapram. We gotta state the elephant in the room here. So Adonis Stevenson somehow avoided fighting a mandatory opponent for 5 years, which is absolutely insane. I actually don't know a fighter who has gone as long as 3 years, so that's very impressive. It was so ridiculous that Ring stripped him of the Ring title because he wasn't fighting worthy opponents. So how was this even able to happen? So Leonard Alvarez is under the same promotion as Stevenson, and he was Stevenson's mandatory for a very long time. Since he was under the same promotion as Stevenson, you can say they worked out a deal where he could just step aside, and Stevenson would just fight whoever. I mean, there was also the Kovalev fight that they were trying to make, but 5 years, that is long. Like, you can't come up with an excuse with that. Stevenson's last legitimate mandatory title defense was in 2013 against Tony Bellew. So how did this scheme fall apart? Well, Alvarez pretty much got bored holding that silver title, fought Kovalev and became the champ. That bumped up Alexander in the WBC rankings to #1, and then sealed a fight for the title, defeating Mehdi Amar for the WBC interim title. Alexander, an Olympic medalist backed by an ambitious manager to urge their powerful promotion Top Rank to get him a title shot at all costs, regardless of political dividing lines. Which this is a case of what rapper Raz Kaz would say, big bank takes little bank. So there was no way Stevenson was going to get out of this fight, so Stevenson puts up a valiant effort. He comes up short and gets dethroned. Unfortunate events happened. I'm glad he's okay now, and Alexander is now the champion. Beterbiev, who also came from the same promotion as Adonis Stevenson, and Alvarez signed to Top Rank, and you really started to see him flourish under the new promotion, as very shortly he's now in line to unify against Alexander. Like I stated in my last video, this was an amazing fight. Beterbiev, who was waiting in line for his time to shine for so long, rose up to the occasion and stopped Alexander late in the fight to become the lineal and unified light heavyweight champion. When it comes to action, this is possibly the greatest Mexico versus Puerto Rico fight. Jeff Chandler was the lineal champion at bantamweight, but Pintor was the best fighter in that division. He was the WBC bantamweight champion, and he moved up to fight the best fighter at super bantamweight, WBC and lineal champion Wilfredo Gomez. It's not always too good to judge how good a boxing fight is on paper, but just looking at that alone, my gosh. Gomez 37-1 with 37 knockouts. Pintor 49-5 and 39 knockouts on a 7-fight win streak against the best at bantamweight. This was fight of the year written all over it. The amount of round by round, back and forth action in this fight was ridiculous. The only fight I can think of that can rival this was the little known 2006 Ring Magazine fight of the year between Sichachawa and Manchapur for the WBA Super Bantamweight title. Despite its obscurity to most boxing fans, there's so much action that any boxing writer couldn't ignore it. Gomez, in a fight for his life, was able to come out victorious at the end of the 14th round and stop Pintor. The third round was named by Ring Magazine as the round of the year. One of the greatest Mexico versus Mexico bouts. Tijuana versus Mexico City. Blue collar versus white collar. This was a WBC and WBO Super Bantamweight unification. Morales was ranked #1 and Barrera was ranked #2. Incredibly exciting match from the opening bell. Very close, hard-fought battle between the two. In the 12th and final round, Barrera would score a knockdown, which could have been a deciding factor in the fight.
Two left hooks by Barrera, and Morales is wobbled. And his heart. And there's the first knockdown of Eric Morales' career.
Morales would win by a very narrow split decision to become the unified champion. This fight was named Ring Magazine Fight of the Year for 2000, and round 5 was named Round of the Year. This fight was big, and it wasn't even for the world title. Inoue was a hotshot prospect, quickly moving through the ranks at the age of 20, with only 3 fights on his resume. Taguchi was in a position for the OPBF title, as he was the Japanese light flyweight champion. The winner will be on a quicker road to becoming Japan's rising star in boxing. Taguchi will give Inoue everything he could handle. Inoue was able to weather what Taguchi gave him and out-hustle the more experienced Taguchi. Inoue will close the show and finish the fight strong to win the Japanese light flyweight title by unanimous decision. Inoue will win the OPBF title his next fight, then become world champion at light flyweight, defeating Adrian Hernandez for the WBC title in his 6th pro bout. Despite the loss to Inoue, Ryochi will still find a lot of success himself. Taguchi, 2 fights later, will become WBA light fly champion and make 5 title defenses before unifying against Milan Milindo for the IBF and Ring Magazine title, becoming the legitimate champion of that division. Champion versus champion, countryman versus countryman, friend versus friend, and sparring partner versus sparring partner. The legendary Jose Luis Ramirez versus the rising Mexican star Julio Cesar Chavez. This was a WBC-WBA unification match. The fight started off as Ramirez being the aggressor, scoring early while Chavez is dancing and fighting off his back foot. You can say Ramirez took in the first 3 rounds due to effective aggression and punch count. Round 4, Chavez finally found his opening after being patient for 3 rounds and almost dropping Ramirez. Round 5 being a bit more even, but Chavez will steal it in the final minute. Round 6, despite being incredibly entertaining from both guys, Chavez will once again pull through and win the trade, taking the round.
José Luis Ramírez y lo pone sobre piernas flojas, trata de responder José Luis, pero la mayor limpieza de los golpes de Julio César Chávez lo tiene botado hacia atrás cuando va a sonar la campana terminando la mitad de la pelea. Véanlo cómo termina en este round.
Chavez is getting the better of the exchanges and is slightly up on the scorecards due to his amazing work after the 3rd round. The fight will come to a halt as both heads clashed, causing Ramirez to be cut. The cut looked to be on the top of the head, but the bloodstream was trickling straight to the eyes. The doctor did not like the look of the cut, and he suggested the fight to be stopped. The fight will go to the scorecards, and Chavez will win by a close technical decision. This is just a textbook best versus the best fight. WBC champion Jermell Charlo against WBA and IBF champion Jason Rosario. Number 1 versus number 2. This fight not only a unification for those titles, but winner takes home the vacant Ring Magazine title and becomes the legitimate champion of the weight class. This was the moment Charlo has been waiting for, and he delivered, putting down Rosario 3 times. To become the unified champion. He is literally 1 fight away to becoming the undisputed champion. He'll be fighting WBO title holder Brian Carlos Castano of Argentina on July 17th. This is going to be a good one. Due to politics and TV network divides, rarely will we see the WBA Super Champion unifying against the WBA Regular Champion. Gennady Golovkin was the Super Champion, Daniel Jacobs was the Regular Champion. When there is a Super Champion, the Regular Champion title is reduced to pretty much a glorified interim title. This title's only benefit is promotions and TV networks can promote it as a legitimate title fight, and the fighter receives title pay. The Regular Champion cannot unify against other champions. That is the reason why Guillermo Rigondeaux was literally squeezed by the boxing elites, as he was the WBA Super Champion at Super Bantamweight, while Scott Quigg was a Regular Champion. Quig's team was not willing to have a Regal fight, nor Frampton unifying against him either. So they got Guillermo to lose the title, Quig got upgraded to Super Champion, and the Frampton-Quig unification is on. Since the best fighters at middleweight were in another TV network, and since Golovkin was a legitimate WBA champion, I can only assume Jacobs wanted to be great, he wanted to fight the best, and have the real WBA title.
Carl, welcome to the barbecue.
Oh, what the hell is that?
They're T-bones, Carl, huh? Yeah, the T stands for tofu. Look at that cut of bean.
Okay, have a crappy weekend. Hope your house burns down.
Hey, Carl, wait a minute. Hang on, don't go. Look, I got the real meat right here.
So in an unprecedented move, we saw Jacobs leave PBC Showtime to fight Gennady Golovkin. Jacobs could have been collecting easy paydays on PBC. He really did not have to make this move at all, so you gotta give props to him. Golovkin started the fight rather quickly, and once Jacobs got his feet wet and felt Golovkin's power, he was like, it ain't much, it's not like Pirog, I can take this guy. And when that happened, the tide of the fight changed, and Jacobs was raking in rounds, to where Jacobs was backing up Golovkin, landing plenty of leather. Very close in the scorecards. Gennady Golovkin will pick it up in the 9th, the 10th being a swing round for the 2. Jacobs will win the 11th, and now in the 12th, the middleweight title is up for grabs for both guys.
On the angle.
Oh, good right hand by Jacobs. Wow.
Fight by Jacobs.
Wow. Oh, good shot by Gennady.
See his Golovkin.
Oh, big uppercut by Jacobs.
Uppercut by Jacobs. Tremendous fight. Tremendous fight now.
One of these big punches produces a knockdown. It could seal the fight one way or another.
Golovkin will squeak away by a close unanimous decision win. Jacobs once again earns the respect among boxing fans, one defying the odds and recovering from cancer, then to pick up a belt, then defeat Peter Quillen in a fight which should have been for the WBO title, then to show the boxing world by giving boxing's boogeyman the run for his money. Jacobs will later become the IBF middleweight champion, defeating Sergey Derevyanchenko. Paul Williams was slowly becoming an American star, rising through the ranks, becoming the WBO NABO champion against undefeated Walter Matisse, earning his shot for the WBO title against the champion Antonio Margarito. After an amazing performance against Sean Bay Mitchell and another stay busy fight 3 months later in November of 06, Williams was lined up to fight boxing's boogeyman Antonio Margarito in July of 07. The myth of Margarito started around 06 when rumors spread it that Mayweather ducked Margarito. Due to those rumors, Margarito's stock went up. There was no ducking of any kind, just rumors and conspiracies. I discussed Floyd's whole situation in the tale of De La Hoya vs. Mayweather I did. Though Williams was untested at this point, since this was Margarito's 8th defense of the title and the whole Mayweather thing, he came in as the favorite to win. Williams making an absolute statement, averaging 100 punches a round by round, beautiful combination punching.
This is the 3rd fight on our welterweight triple header. Seems to have the edge as we're into the 5th of the...
Margarito will have his moments, taking what he can, getting a round here and there when Williams' punch count was lower than usual. And in some rounds, it looked like Margarito was going to win, and Williams would just come back with a barrage of shots, winning the exchanges and stealing the round from him. As seen in the 7th round, this will be a pattern in the second half of the fight.
They stand and trade.
Neither one seems capable of hurting the other with one punch, so we're getting these vicious exchanges.
Margarito had a momentary chance to land his big left hook.
Margarito will have his best round in the 11th, but even then, Williams' resiliency to come back and fight off Margarito to upset his forward momentum was amazing to behold. Williams came out in the 12th much more fresher than Margarito, and he outworked him to win the round. Paul will win by a close unanimous decision to become the WBO welterweight champion.
Who are you going to call out tonight?
Well, I want Cotto. If I can't get Cotto, I want to get a shot at Mayweather.
So many who are watching this video probably never heard of this fight and assumed that the Inoue vs. Donaire fight was the biggest fight in Japan, and surprisingly on paper, this fight is. The hype for this fight in Japan was literally on the level of De La Hoya Mayweather. The Kameda brothers were absolute characters. They quickly became stars in Japan and one of the most known personalities in the country.
Well,
ごい声援が沸き起こりまして、初めての舞台ですか、この笑顔、亀田大輝。
Based on hype and popularity alone, the first brother had a crack at Naido, who was the WBC and lineal flyweight champion. This fight being huge itself and a lot of bad blood between both camps. The fight hasn't even started yet and the father is trying to get in himself, while both fighters having one of the most epic and animated face-offs. Naido will teach Daiki a boxing lesson and win by unanimous decision. Daiki will get suspended for the unsportsmanlike conduct of purposely throwing Naido down, and don't quote me, hopefully someone can correct me in the comments. The father told Daiki to do it, resulting in him to get suspended as well. So after that fight, the hype was quickly building up against Koki, who is a bigger star, the more brash and flamboyant out of all the brothers, also having the skills to back it up too. After the fourth fight against mandatory challenger and former lineal champion that Naido dethroned ended in a draw, this next fight, Naido couldn't escape the questions regarding a Kameda fight, despite Wang once again earning his shot, becoming the mandatory, which will result in a fifth fight with Naido. After Naido's fight, for the very first time, because I've never seen this in Japanese boxing, you had a rival fighter enter the ring, bomb their interview, and call them out for a fight. This was huge. In 2008, I never seen a boxing video come close to hitting 200K. This had close to 1 million views of a potential matchup in which Westerners don't even know who they are. The fight was finally on for November 2009 at the Saitama Super Arena. It's a big arena and not many boxing matches happen there. When it does, it's a big fight. The last event was in 2010, and 9 years later, guess what fight was finally brought back there? Yep, Inoue versus Donaire. The pacing of the fight, very reminiscent to De La Hoya versus Mayweather, but Koki was clearly winning the fight. It will have a memorable 12th round, one last hurrah by the old champion Naido. Koki will win by unanimous decision to become the WBC and lineal flyweight champion. This fight will smash TV records in Japan. 65 million tuned in to watch the fight. 52.1 TV ratings. These numbers are ridiculous. If we compare Mayweather-Canelo 3 years later, 24.58 million watched the fight in America at 41.5% TV ratings. Due to that, Koki was branded the name by American press, the Japanese Floyd Mayweather. And coincidentally enough, when Floyd came to Japan to expand the Mayweather brand, guess who he linked up with? You bet it. Keith Thurman, the WBA Super Champion, and previously holding the WBC belt after beating Danny Garcia, and Pacquiao, the WBA Regular Champion. It's one of those rare WBA unification matches. Pacquiao at the age of 40 was able to once again turn back the clock and put on a great performance, defeating Keith Thurman by a narrow split decision to become the legitimate WBA champion. So this is a rather interesting matchup to include, with an interesting build-up. Ricky Hatton briefly moves up to welterweight to fight Luis Collazo, barely scraping away by a narrow unanimous decision. Hatton immediately vacates the title, and the vacant title is up for grabs between two undefeated rising Puerto Rican stars. Whoever wins will be the man in Puerto Rico. This was Cotto's first fight at 147, and though Quintana has not picked up a world title, he rose through the ranks beating tough competition. The Puerto Rican press and fight fans thought that Quintana was better and all around a better fighter. He was the favorite to win.
Before the fight, we did a poll with different trainers here in Puerto Rico and just one picked Cotto.
No había tenido la oportunidad de titular en su carrera. La tuvo frente a Miguel Cotto y todos pensaron que iba a salir victorioso.
This was definitely the battle of Puerto Rico here, and Cotto was absolutely angry. And you could tell from the opening bell and on, he really put it on Carlos. He blew through Carlos in 5 rounds to win the WBA welterweight title and officially become Puerto Rico's star fighter with the masses. This fight was for the WBC and IBA welterweight title. De La Hoya fresh from his super fight against Tito Trinidad, which left quite a bit of fight fans with a bad taste in their mouth. This was Mosley's third fight at welterweight since moving up from lightweight. Though this fight is for the WBC title and it was considered Oscar's first defense of that belt, his comeback fight against Darrell Coley, it was for the shortly lived IBA belt. So I can only assume that De La Hoya was re-awarded the WBC title without even fighting someone after Tito Trinidad vacated it sometime in early 2000, which is odd, but at the same time it's whatever. By this point, a massive $30 million lawsuit was being filed against him by Graziano Rossiggiani for something just as odd. This fight was the battle of who's the best in California. Both these guys were rivals in the amateurs. De La Hoya repping East LA, Mosley repping Pomona. For out-of-state and country boxing fans, this was just a great matchup, a very TV-friendly matchup. In California, this was their Super Bowl, and the attendance numbers highly reflected that. Smashing Staples Center records, it was a stupendous amount of celebrities to come out for this fight, most more than likely being their first ever boxing match they attended. The Staples Center was constructed in 1998, it opened in 1999, and in 2000, De La Hoya Mosley was the first boxing fight to happen in that stadium. This fight did not disappoint, absolutely exceeding everyone's expectations coming in. Back and forth action between the two. Oscar came in with a chip on his shoulder. People didn't think he could get in there in the trenches and really fight it out, and he was proving to them wrong, going toe-to-toe with one of the biggest punchers in the game. Mosley leading a late round rally, stealing rounds from Oscar to where everything was up for grabs in the 12th round. This round being one of the greatest final rounds in boxing history, both guys putting it all on the line and finishing strong.
Daring to be great. Both going for the knockout in a classic pitch back.
Mosley will win by a very close split decision victory. Great example of the best fighting the best. Ramirez, the WBC and WBO champion. Taylor, the WBA, IBF, and ring champion. Ramirez's road to his first world title took a hot minute. He slowly but surely rose to the ranks, picking up the NABF title in 2014, then the WBC Continental Americas title in 2015, and finally getting his shot at the vacant WBC title in 2018 against Amir Amin. He will make two defenses against undefeated Antonio Orozco and Jose Zapata before unifying against Maurice Hooker for the WBO title. Josh Taylor's road was quite crazy. It all started when he upsetted O'Hara Davies, becoming the WBC silver champion. After a win against Campos and a big win against Victor Postal, Taylor was selected to be in the World Boxing Super Series tournament to unify the division in 2018, and we saw an absolutely amazing run by Taylor. Taylor would end up winning the entire tournament, taking home the Muhammad Ali Trophy, the IBF, WBA, and ring titles. Taylor becoming Scotland's first Ring Magazine champion, since there is no TV network or political divide between both fighters. A undisputed unification between the two is going to happen for sure. The only issue was the pandemic that swept the world, so this historic matchup was put on hold. When sports finally began to open back up, where crowds can attend the fight, a date was finally set. Very exciting fight. Great performance by both guys. When it looked like Ramirez had the momentum, Taylor would score two key knockdowns and within night and day take over the fight entirely. Ramirez in the later rounds will cover and make things closer, some rounds being a toss-up. When it came to the decision, the knockdowns being the difference in the fight, and Taylor will become Scotland's first undisputed champion, achieving all of that in 18 fights. And on top of that, this is the best versus the best in boxing. For another installment, be sure to like, share, and if you're new, subscribe. Subscribe to the Patreon for early access and exclusive patron-backed projects. Shout out to the patrons. I'm Alphas Honcho, and I'm out.